Many of you know Brynde Lambert. She's a fabulous practitioner. She teaches our Prac 1 students. She gives workshops. She gives love. She gives praise. She gives prayer everywhere she goes. She is just a dream come true for CSA. So I ask you to invite Brynde Lambert to the...
I'm just really honored to be here today. Truly. So let's just breathe as one. And we're going to start off with the story here. Once upon a time, two brothers who lived on adjoining farms fell into conflict. It was the first serious rift in 40 years of farming side by side, sharing machinery and trading labor and goods as needed without a hitch. Then the long collaboration fell apart. It began with a small misunderstanding, and it grew into a major difference. And finally, it exploded into an exchange of bitter words, followed by weeks of silence. One morning, there was a knock on John's door. He opened it to find a man with a carpenter's toolbox. "I'm looking for a few days' work," he said. "Perhaps you can have a few small jobs here and there I could help you with. Could I help you?" "Yes," said the older brother. "I do have a job for you. Look across the creek at that farm. That's my neighbor. In fact, it's my younger brother. Last week, there was a meadow between us. He recently took the bulldozer to the river levee, and now there is a creek between us. Well, he may have done this to spite me, but I'll do him one better. See that pile of lumber by the barn? I want you to build me a fence, an 8-foot fence, so I won't need to see his place or his face anymore." The carpenter said, "I think I understand the situation. Show me the nails and the post hole digger, and I'll be able to do a job that pleases you." I don't know if he said it like that, but you know. Yes. The older brother had to go to town, so he helped the carpenter get the materials ready, and then he was off for the day. The carpenter worked hard all that day, measuring, sawing, nailing. About sunset, when the farmer returned, the carpenter had just finished his job. The farmer's eyes opened wide. His jaw dropped. There was no fence there at all. It was a bridge that stretched from one side of the creek to the other. A fine piece of work, handrails and all. And the neighbor, his younger brother, was coming toward them, his hand outstretched. "You are quite a fellow to build this bridge after all I've said and done." The two brothers stood at each end of the bridge, and then they met in the middle, taking each other's hands. They turned to see the carpenter hoist his toolbox onto his shoulder. "No, wait! Stay a few days. I've lots of other projects for you," said the older brother. "I'd love to stay on," the carpenter said, "but I have many more bridges to build." So what do you do when trust has been broken? When you no longer feel valued or appreciated or even respected? What do you do when someone else's actions changes your world and everything you thought you knew? When you have been betrayed? What statement of truth do you hold on to? What spiritual practice can you call upon or surrender into that will allow you to keep your heart open? Well, the statement of truth is that love is present here. And the spiritual practice is that of forgiveness. For the truth is that love is present. It's always present. Love is present wherever we find ourselves. In the midst of fear, anger, hurt, betrayal, in the midst of darkness, despair, sorrow, and despondency, love is still present. The love of God, the love that is God, that divine givingness and goodness of life is still present. That highest and holiest vibration of love is always present. But sometimes we can become so attached to our experience that it looks and feels different than that. Things can look so twisted and feel so twisted that you don't know if up is down or down is up. But you can stand in the knowingness that right where you are is holy ground. It is holy ground with the fullness and the allness and the goodness of God circling and enveloping round about you. When tempted to pull our pain closer to us, we can yield to the strength and support of God undergirding us. When things look the ugliest, when you feel the ugliest. Anybody out there? When the loss feels the greatest, love is still present. God is still God. Life is still life. The nature of God, the nature of good, the nature of love will never compromise itself. But it's like sometimes we get trapped by our own way of seeing, trapped by our own way of reasoning, and we can stay in that trap for hours, days, weeks, months, years, even lifetimes. We can become so convinced that our experience is reality that we stop loving. And at first, it's just one person. But over time, with each occurrence getting easier and easier, it's another and another and another. And before we know it, we have stopped loving. We have stopped living. But love is ever present. It's ever present and waits patiently on us to remember who we are and all that we are. It waits patiently without judgment, without condemnation, still giving freely of itself everything we could ever need, want, require, or desire. Yet in our ignorance, our cup of acceptance gets smaller and smaller and smaller and holds less and less and less of the sweetness of life. For the truth is, we are all God. We are all divine beings. And sometimes it seems as if surrendering to that truth, that that person is God, would put you in hell. But when you refuse to admit it, is that not hell? It is that consciousness of separation, of condemnation, of confusion. I was sitting one day on my cushion doing my forgiveness work. And I thought about this conversation that I had with an old partner. And I had gotten so mad at him, and I was like, "You misrepresented yourself." And he said, "You did too." So I'm sitting there doing my forgiveness work. God bless him. Be happy, may he be prosperous. And then the light came on. I did misrepresent myself. I lied. I lied. And lies are the author of confusion. So here I was, here in this big old mess. And I don't want to say all that was available to me, but what was available to me was the choice and the opportunity to forgive myself. Salvation is at hand and is ours for the taking. When we wake up, when we shake ourselves loose, when we sober up from our drunken thinking, we can return back to ourselves, back to love. Forgiveness is the tool that will get us back to the kingdom. A Course in Miracles teaches, and CSA teaches, that everything in our experiences is either a call for love or an expression of love. No exceptions. That everything is calling us to that highest and holiest state, vibration, and atmosphere of love. Everything. It's not about the condition. It's not about the situation. It's not about the event. It's not about the personality, although you like to say it is. Our work is the work of the heart, work of the mind, framing and reframing the structure of our mindset until all that we see and sense, perceive and know is love. Mother Teresa of Calcutta was with a Westerner one day, and then a young nun came up and said, "Oh, I've been with the Christ all day." Mother Teresa smiled. She kissed the nun, blessed the nun, and the young nun went on her way. The Westerner said, "Wait a minute. Was she with someone in the streets of Calcutta who was dying all day?" Mother Teresa simply smiled. She says, "That's just the Christ in one of his disguises." See, we're all the Christ. And we can have such incredible disguises that no one can imagine that within that person, that behind that behavior, that separate from that act, there is the Christ. It is not when a person has to act a certain way, do a certain thing, or say a certain thing, because it's not about them. It's about you. Can you be true to your nature? Can you show up as the Christ? Oftentimes, we want forgiveness to be like a magic wand that you wave over yourself or over someone else, and voila! You just feel reconciled, safe, grounded, centered. But a lot of times it doesn't work like that. It's a practice and a process. And most often you have to commit to doing it over and over. Just as you talked yourself into taking offense, you may have to talk yourself out of it. You know what I'm saying? How many times did you tell that story before you got, and every time you told it, you got madder and madder. But you may have to remind yourself over and over and over again to choose forgiveness. To choose forgiveness instead of hate or shame or blame or guilt. To choose forgiveness instead of resentment, judgment, and condemnation. You can choose to be like the brother and build a fence, or like the carpenter and build a bridge. The choice you make will either isolate you from life or unify you with it. So I have been talking about forgiveness as a spiritual practice, but the law of forgiveness is one of our foundational concepts. It's a pillar for the Centers for Spiritual Living, of which we are a part. Those of you who've taken foundations already know this, but when you go home, take out your binder from Foundations, dust it off, and find Core Concept 8. It reads, and I'm just going to ask that you just allow your eyes to close and invite your higher wisdom self in for any insight here. If I am holding on to old resentments, if there is any real or imagined injury which I have not wholly forgiven, there is an insurmountable block in the path of my spiritual progress. To free myself, I must totally and genuinely forgive both myself and those who I believe have injured me. Unforgiveness, holding resentment, is a misuse of spiritual law, a rejection of the oneness of all life. Thus, on the human level, forgiveness appears to be a cosmic requirement for restoration of harmony and growth in human living. And so, just in the privacy and sanctuary of your own mind and heart, just ask yourself, can I be willing to forgive? Can I be willing to forgive? Somebody said they can't hear me. So just allow your eyes to open and for that heart space to stay open. Because what it really means is, in other words, for love to be present in your life, in your world, in the outer appearances, it must first be present in your heart. In the lobby, there are copies of A Sure Remedy by Charles Fillmore. It is an outline of a simple forgiveness practice. Your work this week, should you choose to do so, is to take some quiet time and use this practice to open up to and surrender into the experience and power of forgiveness. Now, let me tell you, when you pick it up, he's going to say, sit for half an hour. Well, that's going to stop most people right there, because it'd be like, oh, I don't have half an hour. Just sit. Sit for a minute. Sit for 5. Begin the healing work. Together, we can build a stairway to heaven. So let's just take this message into prayer. Just knowing that right where we are is holy ground, with the fullness and the allness and the goodness of love round about us. And I know and accept that this love is a presence of power and intelligence and an activity, and that there is no chasm too wide that love cannot bridge. I know it is love that connects heart to heart, heart to heart to heart, that we're unified by this divine and healing presence. And I know it is at work in us and through us and as us on our absolute behalf, now and always. I give thanks for this. I speak a word of healing and know it is done. That God can open doors no man can open, and close doors no man can close. That all is truly forgiven. I release this to the law, accepting it as so, and so it is.